Hello and welcome to my channel. It's Róisín here with a little bit of sketching. In autumn, there's one thing I love to do above all else when it comes to art, and that's going out doing a little bit of foraging in the woods or maybe in the fields and having a look and see what I can find, things that I can take back to the studio or to the kitchen table and sketch in ink and watercolour. And in today's video, I'm going to show you a collection of some of my favourite sketches that I've done from bits and pieces I've amassed over the years. Things that have fallen off trees like horse chestnuts and beech nuts, things that I found in the ground like dead leaves, or maybe some of the fruit that I've picked in the hedgerows like blackberries and rose hips. And I love to find fungi, for example, and there's such a variety of fungi to be found within a very short distance if the conditions are right. I've just come back from teaching a 3-day course down in Dunmore East in County Waterford. Dunmore East is a beautiful little fishing village on the very far southeast corner of Ireland, and there's a wonderful art school there called Artform, and I'm lucky enough to be a tutor there. I've had a wonderful group this weekend and we have got stuck in. We did a little bit of foraging, we did a little bit of collecting, a little bit of hunting, and we brought back our finds to the studio and we got stuck in. And in today's video I'm going to share a few of the techniques that I find really useful for getting going with a little bit of sketching. And as you can see, the rain has started and it's really heavy and I'm going to have to run for cover now. So get your little bag, go out into the woods or into the fields, collect what you can find and bring them back to the studio. You'll be happy you did. So here I am in action, sharing a few of my sketches with the lovely group who came down to sketch with me down in Dunmore East. Now, I love the Rosa rugosa, the rose hips. Not alone are they beautiful sketching subjects, but they also make fabulous rosehip jelly and all kinds of other things, rosehip syrup. I really love capturing that glossy surface in a bright red colour, and they're just a lovely thing to sketch. One of my favourite subjects of all are the fungi. Now, you wouldn't believe it, but this little patch of fungi came from an area about, 20 metres in length from the little woods next to my house. In fact, the very woods that you saw in the introduction there. And imagine you find all those fungi in such a small little area. And these ones come from the grassy lawn in front of my house. These are shaggy ink caps and they liquesce, as they say, very, very quickly. So as soon as you pick them, you better chop them up when they're still young and fresh and cook them off. And they make a very nice soup. But they're very unappetizing once they dissolve. Now that one on the left, that would have not made a very good soup because it would have poisoned me. It's called Rustula emetica and it makes you throw up. But on the right, I managed to find some blackberries. You might remember a YouTube I did there last week of sketching the blackberries in the hedge with a friendly little rat at my very, very ankles. I went back into the hedges and I got these blackberries because I love painting blackberries. I love capturing that shiny gloss on each of those little berries that make up the fruit. Of course, I love cooking them. I make all kinds of things from jam and cake and crumble and pie and I don't know what else. This is one that I actually used this picture to advertise the course down in Dunmore East, and I stood in the hedgerow. It was shortly after one of my sketch pockets had been designed and sewn by myself, and I was all excited about being able to actually stand in the hedgerow, and I did that picture of the spider sitting there with its hastily repaired web. Here's a sketch of some fir cones that I did. I found a really nice technique for painting them much more easily than I had up until then been able to do, and I must share that technique with you because it really is a very accessible technique. This is one of my favourites. This was another little walk in the woods that I did, walking through a local woods which is called Cool Park, and it's not too far from me. I love the fact that everything I found fell into the colour palette of burnt sienna, yellow ochre and burnt umber with a little bit of Payne's grey for the shadows that they cast. Payne's grey is always fantastic for shadows. A few apples from the tree in the orchard that is in front of my house, just picked from the branch and laid out in front of me, always make a beautiful subject to paint. Catching those little woody little brown patches on the surface of the apple is really, really nice. And needless to say, I don't hesitate to put these to use as well. That's another apple from my garden. There's a lot of ways you can approach a sketch of a nature find, but in this one I've carefully drawn in a brown ink just to get the shapes and the patterns and the textures really, really nice and accurate. And now I did take pictures, which is why they're a little bit gloomy. I took pictures throughout. I didn't scan them, I just took photos. And in this one I've just used a sap green and yellow mix to capture that colour of the shell of the spiky little horse chestnut, and you can see that there in the top. And once I'd done that, I used the palest colour, the light brown captured with burnt sienna, to capture the shells and to let those dry, and of course leaving that very, very glossy area on the chestnuts by not painting the shiny bits at all. And then when that was dry, I increased the values. I made another layer of burnt sienna just to deepen and darken up the colour of the insides of the shells and the outer rims as well. And building it up as I went, I also used a tiny little bit of Naples yellow in the inside of the shell as well. And then waiting for that colour to dry, I add some darker burnt sienna and maybe a little bit of burnt umber as well on the outsides of the shells. And I build it up, adding more layers as I go. Of course, it's very important to wait for each of these layers to dry, because if you don't, you're going to get colour runs and you won't get that crisp edge that you get if you let things dry. I also waited for the layers to dry and added some more layers there as well. And then when I've got to the end of that and I think, okay, I've done my bit of layering and I'm not going to be able to build it up any further, then it's time to add the shadows. So once again, I used Payne's Grey for the shadows cast by these little chestnuts. You can also see where I've overlapped the shadows, and as you can imagine, they don't work unless everything is completely dry before you put on another layer. Then I decided to add a horse chestnut leaf. Now, because I'm working in an A6 sketchbook, which is very, very tiny, I went out and I chose the smallest leaf I could possibly find, and then I rearranged my subject to sit the little chestnuts and so on top of the leaf, and then I was able to draw it again. This is a value sketch where I've actually just drawn and painted in one colour alone. So I've drawn in a dark brown, De Atramentis document brown, and then I've used my burnt umber as my one colour that I've chosen. You can use any colour you like, but I went with the burnt umber because it is a very versatile kind of a colour and it does lend itself well to a values study. This is one of the exercises that I did with the class down in Dunmore East. I felt that it's important for people to understand the colours they have and to get to know them well. So each person chose their own particular colour that they're going to make their value sketch with, and we ended up with quite a range of colours in the class. And we put the colours on in a very light concentration to begin with, everywhere that they could, and they slowly built them up until they ended up with something that looked really realistic, albeit just in one colour. Another technique that I taught in Dunmore East this weekend was to make a shape in watercolour first with no pen line whatsoever. And you do this by making a very, very dilute wash of whatever colour you think would be appropriate for the sketch you're making. I really like doing it when I'm a little bit less than confident. It works really, really well. And then you can build up your colours little by little. And it doesn't look like much yet. But once you get that feel for the shapes, you can bring in your ink line. I always use a Fude 55 degree fountain pen. And of course, it really doesn't matter what colour ink you use. I personally like to use a dark brown ink, such as the document ink brown made by De Atramentis, who are very good, by the way, and give me loads of ink with their blessing. Whichever type of ink I use, I like to make sure that it's free-flowing, waterproof, and won't clog my pen. And De Atramentis certainly fits the bill. Here's what that particular sketch looked like when it was finished. I believe you can eat these bay bullets, but I didn't chance it because, I don't know, I kind of chickened out a little bit. But I believe they're very nice. I did look them up thoroughly online. And in fact, just make sure you don't take my word for any mushroom species in terms of eating them, because I don't know one mushroom from another. One of the mornings that we were down in Dunmore East, we all went foraging out on the beach. Now, we did find gorgeous little bits and pieces of shells and so on, but most of the following sketches that I'm going to show you did not come from Dunmore East. They came from a beach local to me, like these two gorgeous crabs. Well, actually, it's just the one crab, seen from the top and then seen from the bottom. And I made a little colour swatch at the bottom to sort of, I suppose, give the sketcher an idea of what colours I used. This was one of the classes that I taught with my lovely online group, as was this one. I am quite a passionate woman when it comes to sketching crabs and shells and so on, because they always look so gorgeous and they lend themselves to a rather creative use of watercolour as well, which I love. For example, in these particular sketches that I did of a few crabs from a beach near me, I used a lot of wet on wet technique, which was another aspect of using watercolour that I taught down in Dunmore East this weekend. With the wet and wet technique, it's really a beautiful way to use watercolour. You can see the colours crashing up against each other and swirling around and meeting each other on the page in an, I suppose, uncontrolled way, but it still allows the watercolour to express its own beauty. For this one, I actually sat on the beach near me in County Galway with my sketch pocket, and it was a lovely way to just be in nature. And this one was in fact done from Dunmore East this weekend. A little bit of a seaweed frond there and some tiny little crabs that I picked up on the shore, and I took back to the studio in art form and I painted them, and I shared the technique of wet on wet with the wonderful students who all made beautiful work. Well, that about wraps it up from me for this video on sketching your nature finds, whether they're from the woods, the fields or the beach. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And most of all, I hope you have been inspired to go out and embrace the autumn. Find your own little nature bits and pieces and take them back to your home wherever you are. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Happy sketching! If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn your notifications on so that you don't miss any of the great sketching videos I have lined up for you soon. Oh, brilliant. I've been looking for one of these for ages. God, you never know what you might find in the woods.